Hello, class. It's Miss Roberts here, and tonight we're going to talk about the introduction to intercultural communication, what the class is about, and what are some really good reasons to learn about intercultural communication. Now, in this class, we're going to explore different areas of intercultural communication. We like to call them dimensions of intercultural communication. Fun fact, I took this class 3 times. I know what you're thinking. Wait, did I fail the class 3 times? No, I took the class in undergraduate. So when I was in community college, I took it as part of like a comm studies, behavioral sciences type of major. Well, because it was like level one, level two, freshman and sophomore level, when I transferred to Cal Poly, I had to take it again because it was junior level intercultural communication studies. Okay, great. I took it twice. Different times, got A's both times. Then fast forward a couple years later, went to graduate school, and ta-da, I had to take it again, but I think it was level 600. So I took it at the 100, 300, and 600 level. So I know a lot about this class, but I had to take it a lot. But I hope that you learn a lot from this course. I hope that you learn about not only your culture, but the cultures around you and just being a competent intercultural communicator. All right, so let's begin. All right, so let me go ahead and I'm going to be moving myself a lot. So I have to make sure. All right, so I'm going to move myself a lot. All right, so here's some of the questions you're going to explore. How do constant cultural changes on local, national, global levels affect our everyday lives? How does the renewed emphasis on culture, affect people's societies, and how do intercultural encounters affect our daily lives, work, school, government, entertainment, community, and family? Because culture doesn't happen in a bubble, even though we do have our own cultural experiences, whether we think about our national ethnic heritage, our generation, where we live, where we move to, who we grow up to be. It doesn't happen in a bubble, and everybody else has their own intercultural experiences and their own lenses. So we have to engage with other people. One of the cool parts of being in SoCal is that we get to bump into people from different cultures all the time. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, so in my neighborhood, I come from middle class, working class, African American families like myself. So when I moved to Orlando and then Southern California, I had the great experiences of interacting and meeting different cultures. So that's something that we take for granted here in SoCal. All right. So why is intercultural communication competence important? Let's rewind it back and think about what is communication competence. Communication competence is the intersection of effective and appropriate communication. So when we're talking about communication competence, we're just talking about is it effective, can communicate what you can communicate, and is it appropriate for the occasion, for the audience, so on and so forth. So the world is constantly changing, whether it be our own communities, the way that technology brings us together, the way that social political climate has changed and become more global than many generations ago. It is imperative, or even think about the career imperative. Let me rewind it back. So even think about your careers and working with different people. You might be moving abroad for your career, or you might be moving abroad for school. On a sidebar, one of the biggest regrets I have, not only in life, but during my college career, is not traveling abroad. So if the school offers travel abroad, that might be something you want to take advantage of. It's a lot harder to travel internationally when you get my age. But it's so important to learn intercultural communication because, like I said before, I grew up in the 90s, born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, was an adult in the early 2000s. So growing up, my neighborhood in Detroit was primarily African American, working class, middle class families. And sometimes in certain parts of the country, we have enclaves of just maybe one or two national ethnic cultures or experiences. But now, especially as people move out, people expand, and cities expand, and things like that, that experience might be more rare. So it's imperative that we know about other cultures. And we have different interactions with people in our school, entertainment, government, family, community, and personal identity. So we're going to talk about, in this class, we're going to talk about the self a lot and others. I'm moving myself around. So behind me it says competence. My apologies, I'm going to have to move it around. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to move myself around a little bit as I go down the list. My apologies. All right. So imperatives for intercultural communication. We have demographic, global, technological, and culture. Demographic, like I said before, blending cultures are increasing. And because we interact with people to be competent communicators, we have to be competent intercultural communicators. We don't have a choice. But there's such cool things that come with talking to one another and get to know each other, and it's really fun. Okay, now I can move myself a little bit. Okay. So we also have global communication. So global communication has increased citizens in countries around the world, more connected. Think about, oh, I'll give you an example. I just talked about it the other day in class. So I remember tying in my study abroad rant that I like to talk about when I talk about culture. I wanted to travel abroad to excuse me, I wanted to travel abroad to Japan when I was in college, but I didn't get a chance to do that, family circumstances. But back in the day, this is like, I want to say 2003, 2004-ish. And I was able to get a Japanese pen pal, right? 'Cause I wanted to go to Japan. I would be able to get a Japanese pen pal. And it was really fun. I don't remember her name, but she was so cool because I was able to learn about different artists of the day. I was able to learn about different sides of culture. She was able to learn about American culture too. So I really miss my pen pal. But now, not only can you connect with other people, you don't necessarily need a pen pal. You can just follow someone's TikTok. You can follow someone's Instagram. You can become friends with them. You can go to those places yourself because it's a lot easier to travel now. And you can find those friends and things like that. So with the advent of technology and social media, globalization is just a lot easier. And then also political, economic globalization as well. So tying in with technological, citizens from around the world have more avenues for communication. So we're not just alone in our own little worlds, not even in the States. So we're able to see how people live in other places without leaving our homes. And just for a better cultural accommodation and understanding is increasing, and it's just a really good way to grow as a person. So the interpersonal growth aspect of it too. Okay, so excuse me myself again. All right. Hmm, my apologies. I'm gonna be moving myself a little bit. All right. So the world is undergoing a large wave of cultural mixing. The US is a multicultural society, and because of this, we have to increase our intercultural competence. So I'm really glad you're here because sometimes this class is a chapter that I go over, or maybe a little section I go over, but you guys dove into the class. So I'm really proud of you for doing that. All right, so technological nope, hold on. Technological imperative. There you go. Is the need for intercultural competence. We have the global village. We can see multiple historical events, current events, just from our phones, just from our TV. So we are part of a world village. And economics, cultures, individuals, they spread information like wildfire. And we have to understand how technology, intercultural communication, globalization are kind of connected in that way. And I want you to think about, hey, what significant interactions have you had with people in different cultures? You can think about interactions in SoCal, or think about your travels. At the end of the semester, we will have, unless I make changes by the time you see this video, but more likely not, we'll have a travel guide. And the idea behind the travel guide assignment is to have a little bit of fun at the end of the semester because it's classes. But I also want you to think about, hey, be the travel guide for that country that you want to go to. Let me shift a little bit more. Okay. I think I'm gonna try to move myself over here. Oh, no, I'm disappeared. Hold on. Uh-oh. Hold on. Okay, I'm gonna have to edit this a little bit because it can disappear. Hold on a second. All right. So I realized I haven't really been moving myself at all. So I will just go from here. But I also have the slides available to you on Canvas. So my apologies. I will, for the next video, make space for my square. All right. So let's talk about the global imperative. Globalization is the integration of international economies, cultures, and peoples, and has brought many corners of the world together and has established global economic interdependence. So the flow of peoples across the globe and integration of cultures. We can think of tourism, the educational cultural benefits as well. So understanding cultures is very important because we've become a more global place. We have peace imperatives. So to understand one another, whether it be in an interpersonal relationship or the relationships between nations, understanding where we're coming from and understanding our cultural differences is very important. I think about national security, we have to understand who we are and understand how different cultures can work together, especially because it's becoming more global. Then we have self-awareness imperatives. Like I said before, remember that in this class we're going to talk about the self and we're going to talk about other people as well. Because I can't just be like, oh, their culture, their culture, their culture, without having awareness of my culture to compare it to. When we think about intercultural awareness, we understand that there are people who are inside our culture and we understand that people are outside our culture. Not to say, and it's a totally neutral term, right? There are people who are outside of our cultural experiences, so we have to seek out information to understand them. And then we have to understand ourselves and the people within our culture as well. So the self-awareness imperative is an important step to becoming interculturally competent and understanding our own worldview. And it can be shaped by many factors such as gender expression and identity, race, socioeconomic class, sexual orientation, language, nationality, amongst others. So we want to make sure that we understand that this world is global, that we have increased access to information and cultures with technology, and know that our communities are, for the most part, a mix of different cultures together. All right. So here are the 6 characteristics of communication. If you've taken other communication studies courses before, like interpersonal communication, public speaking, we talk about these things. We might have talked about them in different terms, but when we think of communication studies as a subject as a whole, we might be going over these parts. So symbolic meanings, so maybe actual words, natural language, interpretive, so how do we interpret that meaning, transactional, so how are ideas communicated, contextual, so what's the social, political, environmental context of the communication, the process, so breaking down the processes of communication, why it's happening, when it's happening, and shared meaning. So what is the effects of communication being shared amongst others? Me? Excuse me. So break it down. Communication is symbolic, and here are some of the ways that we can break down those symbols. Symbols is a word, action, or object that stands for unit and meaning. So, ironically, this is the word, this means symbols. This is the word A. This is the word. This is the word action. You see what I'm saying? So, in a very meta sense, us reading the page is how we're using symbols to create meaning. That's what reading is about. Speaking of meanings, is perception, thoughts, feelings that a person experiences that might want to communicate with others, or private meaning. So we can say for instance, if I wrote down, it's cool, right? And I wrote down, it's cool. So the symbols are the same, but sometimes it's cool can mean, oh, it's cool, it's chilly outside. That's why I have my hoodie on. Or it's cool can mean it's all right, it's okay. Even though the symbols are the same, the words can have different meanings depending on the context. So some messages are packaged of symbols used to create meaning. So what is being expressed, what is being shared, and emblems. Nonverbal behaviors that have a direct verbal counterpart, which is essentially culturally relevant. So for example, this means thumbs up. So okay and good. Thumbs down, bad. Peace sign. I did an emblem earlier today. I like the peace sign. I was talking about the peace imperative. I have this symbol in our culture is okay, but in some cultures, this is not a good symbol. There's other symbols in our culture that I can't share because that's not a good academic sign, but those are examples of emblems. Nonverbal communication that have direct verbal counterpart. It's interpretive, so we are figuring out not only how do we receive messages, but how do we agree and understand those messages? How can we reflect on our own communication? How can we become better communicators? But it's an interpretive process. We're constantly looking at and understanding messages. It is also transactional, so excuse me if my screen is in the way. We have the actional view. So, for example, communication. If we're thinking about, excuse me, let me rewind. If you've taken a communication studies class before, you know what I'm about to say. This because as communication studies major, and I took this particular class through separate occasions, we're talking about the communication model, primarily the transactional communication model. What is that? So if it's your first time in communication studies class, what is that? It's pretty much breaking down a conversation, breaking down the ways that we communicate, right? So this theory has been transformed over the years, right? So for example, we had the actional view. So it's linear one-way communication. There's a speaker, there's listener. The speaker sends messages to the listener, and the listener just kind of stands there and absorbs it, right? But we understand that's not how conversations go. So we have the interactional view where speaker and receiver are sending messages and providing feedback. The transactional view emphasizes shared or created meaning. So we have the environment, we have feedback. We are also noticing that even in silence, silence does communicate. So communication is happening simultaneously. So here are just a couple of set of my hands. So there's a couple of slides and images that demonstrate what I'm talking about. Okay. We have the sender feedback and transactional simultaneous messages. Communication is contextual, so it's the physical context or location, social context, shared expectations for the interaction, and it's the personal context. Expectations that people have about behaviors of others. So that's pretty straightforward. It's pretty shared. So when we think about interpersonal communication, it involves one of the people who's we interact with each other. Communication is easier to adapt when people are involved, and it involves meaning and interpretation. So when we think about shared communication, it's shared by the people who are communicating with each other. All right. So thank you so much for joining me tonight as we talked about the basis of not only intercultural communication, but just communication in general. Let me know if you have any questions, and thank you so much for joining me. We're going to be talking about chapter 2 in a little bit. All righty. Thank you. Bye.